two things. We've decided to change things up a little bit. So I hope you can bear with us, because we want to privilege conversation and discussions. So first of all, I want to invite you all to look at the biographies of the presenters in the booklet. I think that is enough for now, and we don't have to introduce them, and therefore it was not necessary to introduce me, because that was not an important thing. I wanted to start out by saying that when I was invited to do this, I think that to moderate, I think that the inviters thought that I would have been to Documenta before I did it. But unfortunately, I got cancelled and I couldn't go. And so I haven't seen it. I'm ashamed, but I haven't. However, no, that's all right. There's one more day. I heard that there's one more day. However, there's something else that then I will make a really facetious and very big statement to say that an answer to what extent has the curatorial endeavor been successful, I would like to suggest, from my perspective, having not seen it, but having been incorporated, conscripted, being part of a global discussion around what kinship and community could look like, what otherwiseness could look like, what the art world could be imagined to be now and in the future, then I can suggest that I want to start out with a resounding yes, it was successful. Now the question is, but with all otherwises, we know that successes don't come without tensions, without struggles, without frictions. And in that sense, we're going to probably engage with some of that at the end as we think of what it might mean to inaugurate a certain kind of otherwise documenting. I want to start out by just jumping into it and ask the question to you, to just say, no presentation, but rather jump into the question, any of the question, like to what extent do you think the curatorial project was successful and why? Who wants to start?
Thank you. My name is Ade Darmawan.
Good so.
I would like to pick up from the... my name is Lara Khaldi. I'd like to actually pick up from the last session into this one, Wayne. So maybe just to say this is maybe a more improvised session and more in discussion. And we don't also want to assume that you have seen the exhibition, but also if you have, don't want to assume that you have in on the process that has led to the exhibition. So we would talk more about that. But first I wanted to maybe as a transition from the last session, thank you for the last session, and also thank you to Framer Framed, because we feel embraced, I think, which is something we haven't felt in some time. No? And to Van Abbe as well, and to all the moderators and the speakers, and for the support. Because that's precisely what kind of made it possible to continue. I was reminded, from the last session by all the speakers, by Mariam's speaking about the museum and personal stories about the Nakba, and then Yazan speaking about the Lumbung and the artists being united, and Esther asking these questions about the Roma Moma Museum and the institution. I was reminded of this something that Edward Said said in an amazing interview between Salman Rushdie and Edward Said in London in the 80s, where Edward Said says that the state of Israel is a state, right? It has the infrastructure to impose its narrative. It has state museums, it has state councils, it has ministries, it has influence. It's a nuclear power which enforces its influence upon the world and its narrative, right? What do the Palestinians have? No? They only have people to tell the story, right? So once the story stops being told, it falls, right? So you keep it alive, you keep it going by telling the story. And I think this doesn't only, I mean, this anecdote or this beautiful poetic image from Said, is not only about Palestine and the Palestinians, and of course about our situation, but perhaps to even say that maybe today I also felt, while listening to the two sessions and yesterday, that perhaps we are lucky that it happened in this documenta, because it could have happened during a different documenta, and the support would have not been there. So there was the institution, it's true, of documenta, and we can talk for 2 years, 5 years about that, but there was the Lumbung, and the Lumbung with the majlises, with what we built and how we built it and how the Lumbung was, is what held us and supported all of us together through this. The solidarity that actually came out of this is what pulled through in this. Yeah, so I just wanted to maybe bridge this with that, and then maybe we can speak more about how actually we arrived at what the Lumbung, when we say Lumbung now, what it means to us. I don't know if Ade or Gertrude want to pick up from here.
Okay, thank you. I was just saying to Lara how it's nice to sit with her and be able to speak about the experience, because we hardly had time to sit together, no? So when you say this, speak about Israel and Palestine, I think also the Institute and the Lumbung, no? But also to say this maybe that we never set out to change documenta, no? We set out to build the Lumbung based on the Lumbung values. So the Lumbung as a curatorial concept, but also as an economy based on values that we've been repeating over and over: generosity, regeneration, locally anchored, humor, and so on. So if you come to this question of successful, I don't think it will be a word we would use anyway, success. It's not about whether we transformed documenta, it's whether we have been able to build the Lumbung. But of course, there have been these two systems, these two value systems that have been working together. And I think a lot of what is successful or not successful is in these two clashes of systems that are maybe also the fundamental ground why everything happened like it happens. But yeah, back to what we did, the question Lara posed in reality, and maybe to my t-shirt, which is a harvest from documenta, saying collective pot. We started to build the Lumbung, and I think two essential parts of it was, one was our curatorial question based on these values of locally anchored and regeneration. To all the artists and Lumbung members was to work on the sustainability of their ecosystems, find a translation to Kassel, and then also use that translation again back in the local ecosystem. So not seeing this commission model as like the artists being extracted from their context, work for 100 days and that's it. Although it still feels a little bit like tomorrow it's over and what's after. So this regenerativity, I think, was very fundamental. And then the other path, the Lumbung building, so really building the collective process around the rice barn of resources, and the collective pots is maybe part of that rice barn. We structured it. Our initial idea was actually to have all the production money and all the resources in one big collective pots and have huge assemblies all the time that would collectively decide on how to curate and distribute the money. Because of COVID, that we nearly start forgetting, this was not possible. So we built actually a structure of all the artists were grouped in the biggest Majlis assembly was 14. Esther was part of that, and Yazan as well. And then smaller mini majlises of 5 to 6 artists that were working together around every artistic project, and also around a collective pot of production money and care and ideas and knowledge they could share to build their projects. I'm talking a lot. Maybe Ade wants to continue.
What I want to do, actually, no, Ade, I'm going to invite Ade, and actually not necessarily to respond to me, but I want to just hold on to a few things as we go through. One of the things that I find interesting, both in this discussion already, as well as other discussions, I was in one 2 Fridays ago, is the idea that there is so much projected onto Documenta, onto what your intention was. And then whenever we speak together, you say, actually, that was not our intention. Our intention is not to battle with Documenta. Our intention is to create a space for something else, which is, so in what some theorists will call a kind of refusal. You know, I'm not interested in that. I'm doing what I'm doing. So that's one thing that I want to hold on to. And the second thing what I want to hold on to is a certain kind of politics of redistribution rather than a politics of recognition. That there is a certain thing, the collective pot. Let's share the money. Let's share the love. Let's share the care. And I'm interested in also with that, Ade, and just to hold on to that, these ideas.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Charles van Abbe. Esche. 17 years. How many? 17 years, yeah. Be careful. So Harto is 32 years, Charles. You're almost dictator. It's getting there. Thank you. It's just like picking up. It also it was also our intention not so much to make a show or like exhibition, because we see it as a journey. You know, like because we're practicing Lumbung already for several years, and we try to extend that. We try to have more conversation with other similar models that we can learn from. So when this actually also like really taking out. Actually, there is many things that we do is quite I don't know, like I feel like it's actually quite simple. You know, like for example, we take out the center thematic that is always there during the exhibition making, for example, or like during the artistic research, and we take that out from the center. Actually, quite simple, but it also shows how the ideas of curating, and also even like later on, really how it shows also how solid and how exploitative, for example, and how extractive is the exhibition when we go on and trying to apply this or try to install this model, Lumbung, into sort of like already existing tradition of exhibition making, productions, contracting, and so on. So we take that out. It actually changed also how we approach or like make conversation with the artists. It's more mutual. It's more like a commitment if we sort of like doing a certain journey rather than you invited for exhibition. You know, it's not like that. It's more like really a commitment towards a certain process. That's why also, I mean, like commenting or like following with all the majlis and so on. It's really a lot of labor, of course, a lot of time and energy consuming. But it's really great. Thank you for all artists. Actually, like really everyone is become it's part of the commitment as well. Rather than so exhibition is like a commitment as in the process, rather than like bilateral artistic service provider with the producer, which is always like that, this bilateral and singular relation actually. So we go on that, and then it's actually changed a lot of stuff. So it's it's not really something that we sort of impose or something. It's really grow sort of like organically. A lot of it also, of course, it's freak people off because we get used to with the design, with the plans, and so on. And like, can you imagine? Like, there's a lot of things that's actually piled up one by one, all the decision and so on and so forth. So it's really something that is actually growing, rather than something that there's a goal and then we succeeded to get that goal. It's not something like that. I think I'm very happy that actually the whole thing has become like a big conversation, and I think that's actually what the most important thing, that a lot of struggles is actually never really speak to each other, and quite close, but also in the same time isolated to each other. You know, like even in our region, for example, it's not easy to find, like the South is actually meet in the North, like exactly like documenta. So how it's actually to steal this, to steal that moment and resources as well, sort of like to make like really ongoing conversation, relation, connection, solidarity, which is actually will develop after this, which is I'm really happy that it's actually over tomorrow. Because I'm really looking forward. I mean, I can actually I would say like I can stop anytime, because I think point taken. It's, I think we can go out also from the simulation kind of and or like representation kind of like modes, and like really doing and practicing rather than talk about, and the whole things really happen in this process or in this journey. I was also like Lara said, it's thankful that it's happening in Documenta, but also I would imagine as well, if this all happened without Lumbung, I think that's also what we can imagine as well. I think I'm really thankful that everyone involved also really sort of like Lumbung becomes sort of a structure or construction that's actually people can stand and hold, and also even imagine what's actually after, which I think not many exhibition can think even beyond itself. So I think this is few things that I can add on to this. Please, Ade.
Thanks.
Yes. No. What?
No. I said I'm Ade.
All Ade, maybe.
I want to hold on to just one thing here, because it strikes me that so many people are glad that tomorrow is the end. So, but I'm interested also in this, in a feeling that I've also seen around Documenta, but in a lot of the other activist formation around institutional change, which is around the exhaustion and the idea of exhaustion, both conceptual exhaustion as well as exhaustion with the institution that you're constantly battling with. So perhaps somebody wants to bring that up later on for a discussion. I don't know who you are, so you have to introduce yourself.
I'm Charles Esche, and I guess I'm a little bit of an intruder in this panel because I'm not part of Documenta organization, but I was a little bit inside because I was part of the finding committee, which is a group of people that are appointed to appoint the artistic director of Documenta, and that group changes every 5 years, and it's done about 3 years before the opening date, 3.5 years or so. So it's actually not a 5-year process, but a 3.5-year process that they went through. And so I was very involved at that beginning stage, and then very little involved, but sometimes had conversations in the interim period, and then was a guest at the Documenta when it opened, and I've been back a number of times. So I suppose what I would like to maybe think about most particularly is what Documenta 15 leaves for us. What can we harvest from Documenta 15? And harvests can be sometimes extractive. And I remember when it's probably secret, but I'm going to say it anyway. When the process of choosing the Documenta artistic director, Ade at some point took a whiteboard and drew a circle on it in order to explain the principle of Lumbung. So rather than a line, a timeline, a sort of modernist arrow of time, which always endlessly ends up in progress, in which white men are at the top, he drew a circle, a return. Yeah? And so maybe at this moment we're at the beginning of the circle or the end of the circle, because they're the same point again, and we need to see how we get another rotation and another rotation. So it feels to me that talking about the future of what these people have done, and I want to say how much I have empathy for the extent to which they have suffered, they have been attacked, they have been abused, sometimes physically, the artists, the organisers, the amazing Documenta team. We shouldn't forget how many wounds this has also left behind. And I think it's important for us all to understand what the media, and it's not just a sort of art historical critical account, as we've heard repeatedly over the last 2 days. This has been something very different than the kind of usual response you can expect to doing an exhibition, and certainly something that I, as a curator of biennales elsewhere, have never experienced to the degree that these people have had to stand, and they've stood for 99 days, and they're going to stand for another day. And that standing in the face of the attacks and not so much criticism, really the attacks, is, I think, an important thing for us to measure. But anyway, I was thinking like what, from my point of view, and from the generation to come, you know, what's going to be the things that we can make use of in Documenta 15 that will have a sort of lasting legacy. And once you start to list them, it feels to me to be a transformative exhibition, a game changer, if you like. Because what it does, and I'll try and list them very quickly, and this will mean that I won't fully justify them, but you forgive me for that. But one thing, the Lumbung experience itself, the Lumbung idea, shifts the whole notion of the star curator, of which I've been accused of being one, but many others. It shifts it to the idea in which there's a collaborative unfolding process, a kind of cadavre ski, if you like, in which responsibility is handed from one to the other, And as Florian said, I think very intelligently, in a country like Germany, the idea that you would lose control in a cadavre ski by allowing somebody else to write on your paper is so absolutely foreign to the educational system that's one of the reasons that it's been provocative. Because, you know, I remember Ade or Andan, one of the ruangrupa, saying at some point during the opening, I have no idea how many artists are in this Documenta, let alone who they are. I don't even know the number. So, you know, that letting go again presents a whole series of different possibilities. There's a lot to say about Lumbung, and I think you've said it as well, the nature of working. But it's not only the Lumbung. It's an important thing to mention is the Lumbung Art Gallery. The fact that we, as institutions like Van Abbe Museum, can buy as we collect and as we have money deliberately earmarked from the state to buy artworks. Here we can't do anything else with it. We have to buy objects, which you could question. But nevertheless, in doing that, we can go through a system which feeds that circle of going back to the institutions and the artists' structures themselves, rather than goes into the loop of the 1% and the super rich, which is, as Jonas correctly said, a large part of the art world is to reify the extraction of wealth from the 1%. That's what a lot of artists are basically performing for. They weren't really ever doing something to be nice to Documenta. You weren't doing anything to be nice to Documenta, but no artists were doing. But the traditional model is they were doing something for Documenta in order to get it picked up by Hauser and Wirth, in order to get a super rich collector to buy it. That was the route, and that's still the route that a lot of students in academies in the Netherlands are being taught is a successful route for an artistic career. So breaking that with something like Lumbung Art Gallery is a game changer. 3 other points, sorry, just very quickly, or from the responsibility. The other point, I think, is that this is an exhibition which finally says forget the 20th century. And that's again something I think which is perhaps even insulting to the German identity, which is grounded in the 20th century and grounded in this moment in 1945. We are in 2022, we shouldn't forget that. So we are quite away from the 20th century, and certainly from the middle of the 20th century. And the catastrophes that we are facing now, of course there are catastrophes in the past that need to be remembered and need not to be repeated. Of course, it goes without saying. It would be absurd to say that we forget that responsibility to what happened in the 20th century. But if we think about the catastrophe of climate change, for instance, which is very present in this exhibition, then is that not a very important aspect in which an exhibition in 2022 should busy itself with? And that is not grounded on the National Socialist dictatorship between 33 and 45 in Germany. It is not grounded on that, unless it is grounded on that dictatorship being related to the whole modern colonial world system. Yeah, so unless we can talk about that dictatorship in context and not as a unique event which should never be repeated, but everything else is kind of fine in colonial modern thinking, unless we can do that, then we can't talk about climate change in relationship to it. Yeah, we can't talk about very much actually in relationship to it. We can't talk about patriarchy. We can't talk about the catastrophe of colonial exploitation, settler colonialism, extraction, patriarchy, whatever you want. Yeah, we're not allowed to do that if we isolate it. And I think that Mia said very beautifully yesterday that it's not about saying that the Holocaust is not unique, but it has a genealogy and a context which we are and must be able to talk about if we are ever to prevent it again, if we are serious about preventing it again and not just virtue signaling. So I think that that's what this documenta means in terms of its relation to the 20th century. And finally, I think it's very important that it moves away from the classic modes of art, whether that's realism or avant-garde, which are about representation and about critique. Yeah, criticality, what I was brought up with in the 90s. Artists should go find something out and point at it, and then point at mostly the government and say, go and solve it. Yeah, so the job of artists was to point, to be declarative. Look, this is a problem. And you, whoever you are, yeah, mostly a sort of notion of representative democratic government, should solve this question. Or we perhaps should solve it through NGOs, but ultimately there should be a change in behavior. Now, a lot of that critique led to an idea that actually it's not the object that's being pointed at that is the problem, but it's the system of values which that object is a manifestation of. And we've just heard, I think, really clearly that Lumbung is a change in the system of values. That's why it's a problem. Lumbung has not delivered an art exhibition that accords to the system of values which pre-existed it. Yeah, it's delivered something else because it tried to shift the change of values. And I'm always reminded of this case of the conservative, the conservative radical, the conservative left. Just let me finish this, yeah. Who says, we want change, we have to have change, but not that change. And every specific change is always excluded in the desire of being colonial. And Lumbung is a change, and what the conservatives from the left particularly, Hito Steyl and those people, are saying is, yes, we want change, but not your change. And that is as negative a response as any from the far right. Thank you.
All right. I mean, I want to... No need to be sorry. I'm just, in terms of distribution of time, I think that it would be good for others to speak. But I just wondered if we could invite, if you would like to respond to each other right now, or I can pose questions, but you could respond to each other. One of the things that I find interesting, again, something on the agenda, is your articulation of Lumbung as a certain way of being, a certain way of doing, a certain kind of practice. And your invitation is to so many people to be a part of this practice from their own positions. And I wonder how, personally, I've always wondered, how do we practice Lumbung differently? And what is at stake in that differently practicing when it comes together as a single idea, as a single otherwise, basically. But as again, you never have to answer my questions. It's up to you. Yeah?
Actually, maybe responding to something that Charles said and your question now, and maybe to continue also from where Ade left it, is you're saying that how we invited the artists. We'd like to think of it as more as a mutual collaboration, or that they invited us, and that really they invited us to their practices, and perhaps then also responding to your question about the otherwise and being one. In the Lumbung we say not one but many. Not big but many also, right? And the Lumbung is not only the Lumbung, right? I mean, the use of terms, let not the use of terms maybe confuse us, but the Lumbung is so many sharing practices that are brought by the different collectives and artists in the Lumbung, right? Like the Maya, like le 18 were also practicing the Agrau, many traditions, sharing traditions from their communities, and which they have been practicing in their own collectives and artist-led institutions. And those were all, we have to remember that all of these collectives have been sustaining themselves, many without funding, with little funding, surviving in refusing, like the Abbe governmental funding. We were speaking of for example, liberating, right? The question of funding brought this term, like liberating the funding, for example, right? How do you remove the conditions of the budget, such as we did with the common pot, right? Removing the conditions. So just to say that the Lumbung is so many voices, but these were also the mutual collaboration that we had with the collectives and artists was based on their practices of sharing, already existing practices, So and then it was amazing to see actually how in the practice of the mini majlises, and the Lumbung interlocal, which were basically, what Gertrude was saying, and Ade, where we asked the artists for a very serious commitment, because they were committing to their time and what they know to others, right? To the other artists, because the mini majlises were small groups of artists. We grouped them in small groups because we couldn't meet in real time and physically because of COVID, into what we called the mini majlises. 5 artists or 6 artists would come together, would self-organize a meeting every week or every 2 weeks, right? We would meet in majlises constantly in what we called, what we termed Majlis Akbar, or when we all came together. So they were bringing their practices of collectivity and sharing into these small majlises and discussing what to do with the common pots and how to sustain further together as well. And the part about, just a brief part about the commissioning, right? We never worked with this logic of commissioning, right? What Ade was saying, this like relationship with the institution. It's like a service providing with the artists, right? You give me a service, you make a work that's responding to my theme, also in terms of the curator's role. Like, I talk for 2 hours to you, and then you have to respond with the work. And it wasn't at all, because again, these were artists whose work, whose practices, whose survival we admired and belonged to as well. And so the logic was not based on commissioning. It was based on continuing to do what they are doing, and that we work out a translation together in Kassel that was not extractive. How successful that was is a question, or I mean, I don't want to use the term successful, but how well it worked in the benefit of the artists and their localities is a question, I think. But yeah, I need to pass the mic.
Yeah, pass the mic. That's good. the relay. No, probably Ade or Gertrude wants to speak. I mean, just to lay my cards bare, when Miriam said she... Oh, sorry. Yeah, just to lay my cards bare, when Miriam says she does not work with the Tropo Museum anymore, well, I do. So any question about that comes to me. But in a certain sense, what I find interesting, because I come from a totally other place of thinking, and I'm almost ashamed sometimes to say it, from the ethnographic and the anthropological. And in that sense, we are... Was that? No, because that's where I come from. I can't say that. But from that sense, it's an interesting space to be in, because what you describe is how we describe questions of the pluriversal and not the universal, and the flourishing that is a part of the pluriversal, and what that means of multiple ways of being otherwise in a big scale. Ade or anyone. Take up. Oh, there is, yes. Hold on.
Thank you, Wayne.
No.
I want to use the word success. The problem with the Documenta 15 is we don't have the time to celebrate this success. Wave after wave of allegations, attacks, just coming to us. So our experience as Taring Padi, we find ourselves have to defend the fortress. So since the controversy, we start to talk about, let's just go home. We are not welcome here. But at the same time, one of us remind us, let's consult our members and the community we work with. And they say, stay there as long as it was planned. And then why do you go home? People still come to our exhibition venue. People queuing for 2 hours to enter Hellebat Oz under the rain. So it said our responsibility not to the Documenta 15, but to the works and what the work conveys. And this is something that we need to celebrate this thing. But we found ourselves, we can't celebrate this thing. We can't celebrate the success that the conversation that happened between different struggles that Ade mentioned earlier, that already happening. Ade mentioned that this is the kind of quote-unquote exhibition that think beyond the exhibition, but it's actually happening. And before the exhibition finished, we already talked to different struggle, and we already planned something very, very concrete. That's all happening not only with Taring Padi, I'm sure with every single collective involved in the Documenta 15. And we didn't even have the time to recognize that. There's another politic of recognition. We can't even have the time to recognize our own achievement. I find it very hard to comprehend. Yeah, let alone sharing that kind of success. Thank you.
Hold on, I want to go back to the panel and then I come back. Is that right? Because I think that there is a way in which, and that's what I mean by conceptual exhaustion. I know from working in an institution that, to be honest with you, every 2 minutes we celebrate success. Even when there's nothing to celebrate, we just love to. We are now decolonized. Celebrate it. So there is a conceptual thing about what it is we're trying to do, and what is the concept. You also say to recognize or to mark what it is we've achieved. That's different from celebration. No, not yet, Charles. Yes, Ade.
You stop, eh? Sit. No, thank you. It's that's why also maybe we would like to work from around, you know, like apply it as Farid says, like different operating system rather than sort of like react to it. So it's like really practicing or like installing the operating system, it crashed to the old operating system. It hurts also for us, but I think there's a lot of things that it's thank you for the session before talking about. I think there's a question about the institution as well, which is we in Indonesia history. I mean, like we sort of like learn a lot as well, like from activism, and so like how actually which position that you're going to take, like are you going to change the system inside the system, or like are you going to barking from outside? And like Charles as well, like pointing out, or like the other option will be, which I think not many people will do, because it's really very speculative and very time consuming, and many things it's actually doesn't have enough resources. It's actually developing other speculative model and really focus on that. And when it's actually slowly bigger, and then maybe it's not crash, but to make the old system become obsolete. So this is the things that, this exhaustion, I think also coming from because it's crashed, but that's why I really looking for that it's over, because like because of that, it's not more, not less, that are really looking for that the real Lumbung will be practiced and will be challenged, will be learned and unlearned and so on, with different entities. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully, in this kind of like manner, like really focusing on that. And then making it really become not really a counter, but like really when it's grow, I think it will crash anyway. I people maybe forget that we do this already 20 years. 22 years. So and many other model or many other friends as well already. It's just like because this model it's there, and I mean like it's never been really in a practice in such a way, like installing the practice, because like many events or like artwork just like picking up this practice as a spice, but never really want to do it, but actually this is actually the big conference of like the big collection of different models that if we see it, it's many of the practices actually already happen or already been practiced in many years, and it has certain proof that it's actually can exist and can survive. So again, like when try to remember like how the process of in conversation with a lot of friends and collectives, it's really more about whom you're going to be friend with or collaborate with or learn from, rather than like to make a show. So this is what happened. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. There are many questions. Gert, you want to? Yeah. All right. Mia.
Thanks, Wayne. More of a comment, since you did the Academics Anonymous and said you were coming from an embarrassing discipline, I do too. But let's say that art history might consider this documenta as successful. I mean, it's just really until, or not before you were talking here, that it occurred to me why Richard Bell put Duchamp's urinal with party balloons near the toilets of the Friedrichshainum. And that is precisely it, sharing, communities and solidarity have been part of art for centuries, and certainly have continued to work very successfully, especially in places where the market isn't very strong. I know that from East Germany, from Northern Ireland, even just to stay within Europe. And when you consider that as having been theorized, for example, by Gregory Chollet as dark matter, or there are other ways of formulating that, now dark matter is in the spotlight. And it started possibly, as I tried to say yesterday, with Boyce's FIU. We could have pointed out the omnibus for direct democracy and referendum as part of, I think, Documenta in '82, with the general basic income as a claim of Documenta, more or less. Yeah. If success in art history is to be part of a genealogy that was previously occluded or something like that, yeah, some kind of movement in art to be brought into the daylight as this thing that really propels our thinking about art and about the world and so on, then this is really successful.
Thank you. On behalf, quick question? Yeah? No, you want to have a question? Yeah.
It was a statement, not a question. I think that one of the things that when I was talking to Charles outside the bathroom yesterday that came up was, I was, right outside, stopping him from having his coffee, was one of the things that, he put much more eloquently today that came up was that Documenta was a clear and present danger and challenge to the status quo of the art world. And I think that is why, and I thank you for bearing the brunt of the attacks, you were attacked so often and so violently, because it wasn't just that you were attacking the status quo of the art world and capitalism, but the actual concept that the art world had in and of itself. And so there was sort of an existential crisis that was happening in the minds of all of these critics who suddenly felt, especially the German ones, ich wohne in Deutschland. And so these German critics, and I'm at the Bauhaus, and so they felt not talked to, they felt ignored, they felt overlooked, and they felt excluded. And for those of us who have always been overlooked, excluded, and talked right over. I mean, I'm only 5'2". So this was normal for us, but this was an insult that the powers that be could not tolerate, especially from a bunch of subalterns who were supposed to be grateful for being in the institution at all. You did not display enough gratitude, and that made me very happy. So, yeah, just one more thing, sorry. And so, this practice of Lumbung that we have all been doing, because, I walked away from this stupid art world while still keeping one foot in it, to do it on the streets and in politics and with the people, is what all of these artists around the world had been doing. And so they just didn't have a framework, a way to talk about it, to talk about collectivity, collectivität, collectivism. And this Southeast Asian framework, since I also have roots in this, that made it even more challenging to capitalism, is this idea that in Filipino we have a word for, which is called kapwa. And it's the feeling of the sense of the self in the other. And that's also why it was very telling when you said, I am Ade, and Charles is Lara Khaldi today. And when I came into the Documenta, I didn't give a damn about the art world audience, the powers that be. We were watching Richard Bell be a rock star with a urinal in the basement, and we had that sense as artists and students and people that we were doing this together. So I thank you for that from the bottom of my heart, because I see this as the challenge that will go on, and that you have built something that will continue, because we are you and you are us, finally.
we might not need to celebrate. We might just need to acknowledge. And I must admit that allusion to the question of ignore and ignorance is beautiful. I want to hold on to that as a conceptually fruitful thing that we need to talk about in the future. Can I give the mic back to you now, after all of the...
Maybe coming back to what Alexander was saying in your pluriverse. Because I think initially envisioning the Lumbung, we took a lot of time also thinking about the cosmologies of all those concepts, no? Lumbung, Maya, and being really specific. So also looking towards the future, how does the Lumbung not become the new trend? No, but it remains specific. And also yesterday in the car driving here, we were actually saying, okay, we built the Lumbung not in reaction to Documenta, but it's still with the reality of Documenta. And I felt more and more we came to the production phase. Our curatorial work has been a lot about budgets and changing Excels and more than maybe speaking about the exhibition. And now maybe is the time to get back to that first year when we were sitting, especially with the Lumbung Interlocal, and we had so much time, or we took so much time, even on Zoom, to be hosted by each other, for example, no, in those different cosmologies or of those practices, and every Lumbung member would host sessions, and you could feel like the specificity of those practices. And then getting back to what Alexander was saying, like if this is successful, I think we need to return back to that, and Documenta is not finished at all. It will be extractive if it stops like this. And also the community, I think, the Lumbung community still needs time to celebrate, but also to harvest. No, I feel this very strongly. Now people are saying, okay, now you have to give over the stick to others, to Lumbung, which I also agree, but I think we are just like 2/3 of the process, and it will become really extractive if we don't do that.
I want to give the mic to Charles. I have a specific question, but you can respond to everything you've heard. First of all, though, I want to tie something Ade said earlier to something Yazan said earlier today. Yazan was speaking, and he says, how much of these attacks, he said, is not about changing the present, he said, but it is about changing or influencing the future. And interestingly enough, I've heard, for me, I'm interested in temporality right now, but Ade is saying something else, because Ade is saying the Lumbung is not so much about the present. It is also about a particular kind of future. And what you do, when I remember Charles doing this with the loop, that it is a practice that you've been doing 20 years now, 22 years now, that you're hoping to see tomorrow end, and what futures will emerge from this. So I'm interested in this idea of time and the future. Charles, Mia just said the art art historians are now changed. Margaret says the art institution felt ignored, and you provocatively suggest your 4-point plan for what would happen to the art world in the future. And from me working in the museum, I know we are stubbornly persistent. We ignore and we ignore. What do you think will... I'm less hopeful. Let's say that way.
I mean, I think sometimes the grass is greener, because when you said that you're from the embarrassing discipline of anthropology, I thought how if I was 30 years younger, that's where I would be, and not in art. I have to say that, because I think that the big, well, maybe the biggest potential doesn't lie in museums that were formerly called ethnographic or whatever we might have called them in the past. or colonial indeed, let's be clear with it. And because I think that division, this modern division between white people's art that went into art museums and things that weren't called art but had some of the similar ritual aspects as white people's art was put into ethnographic or colonial museums, that division is one of the fundamental mistakes that makes modernity so horrific, actually, in its violence, in the violence of the knives that went in not only to bodies but also into thought processes and disciplinary processes. So one thing is that we need to heal that wound. No, we need actually not to think that your discipline is not my discipline and my discipline is not your discipline. And art history also comes into that. I think that we need to figure out how we can tell a story in which the objects that you were given from that colonial heritage and the objects that we were given from our modern heritage actually can tell a story together that is neither colonial nor modern, but is something demodern, decolonial might be a direction to go in. And so I suppose if there's a future, if we talk about these futures and this question of time, it's really that what's useful about the archives that we have, and we talked a little bit about archives yesterday, is that archives can also become memories in a certain sense. They can be reactivated in the term of memory. I always think of Walter Benjamin, who's not so popular these days, but he talks about the past as being a memory that flashes up at a moment of danger. And this idea that the archives are there in order to flash up at a moment of danger, and different things flash, different things go off, depending on the nature of the moment of danger. So now I think we need to see what that moment of danger is. It's why subversive films, you think they're up there, are so important at this moment, because the moment of danger is certainly in Germany, and then by default, maybe in the whole of Western Europe, the erasure of the Palestinian question. And I think one of the direct consequences of what we're doing of Documenta is that we should fight, every institution that feels a responsibility should fight to represent Palestinian work as much as is possible within its programs from now on. And so that the complaints are so multiple that they can't actually be tackled. I think that's a way of tackling these things. So I think that we have to think about that future much more in terms of breaking those models. But one thing that maybe just to finish, to respect, or breaking those modernist models, no? But one of the things that I want to say is that what Lumbung was a proposition, was an offer. It wasn't a critique. That's what you've said a lot. And we are stuck, our institutions are stuck in the mode of critique and criticality. And I think that's what we have to learn from Lumbung. And how can a museum like ours become prospective and propositional? And that's something that I think we need to learn. But we can learn through Lumbung, and can learn maybe through this old modernist inheritance of the freedom of art. Even this absurd and very problematic claim to artistic autonomy could be turned into a useful concept, maybe for all of us, to think about what it would be to be a propositional institution rather than a critical institution.
I think Ade has the mic, and then Lara. Yeah.
Do you think it's possible, Charles? Let's say, like, how you're going to transform Van Abbe, for example?
I think I have to leave Van Abbe, so that's another question. But I think that, and I think you're right. 17 years is way too long. But I think that I don't know. I suppose all my career has been about trying to see if it's possible, and at the end of it, I think I'm not sure it is. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's several things in my mind. Like for example, we've been talking about a little bit here history and also artworld, and I think I'm a bit disturbed because I think maybe we imagine like these two things is actually one, or like a sort of like one single thing, because I think this Documenta should also teach us that it's actually there is no singular art world and there is no singular history. I think like who's write the history, like who's going to write this Documenta. I think it's going to be also a big challenge, a big problem. I think that's why I really would like to finish this. And everyone in Lumbung should write about their own stories, because this is a problem about about who's writing it, and I think this is the time that everyone is actually write their own stories. I mean, like history is, for us is always problematic because it's been always written by someone else. So this is also the thing that should be a challenge after this, and also artworld. I mean, like we've been talking about artworld, but it's actually this artworld, yeah. I mean, like it's here, you know, like this. If you give me time like 20 hours and then I fly and I arrive in Jakarta, I will be in different artworld. You know, like, so talking about Jatiwangi, for example, that's another. So it's like, I think this is we should start to speak differently and also carefully also, because there is this non-singular notion that we deal with.
Lara might want to respond, and I bring the mic. Yeah, go ahead. If I knew I was going to exercise today, then.
Thank you. Before you fly home, I would like to say we have heard the academics in the last 2 days and people that had taken part at the documenta, but the usual artist hasn't been heard. The effect of the Lumbung and the whole ideas of the documenta that has been given to us as regular artists and what we give through maybe to students at art schools is immense and it's fantastic. And we're now stuck in some kind of thought of criticism, accusation, victimizing. But I cannot say how grateful I am that the idea of Lumbung that I'm already working with since 40 years has now been shown to me that there are people in totally different parts of the world working with the same idea. And this was just fantastic, and there were 3 different groups, and please go home with a good feeling, because on the base, you're in an upper layer, but on the base, there's very much has happened.
If I might suggest that Lara will have a last kind of word, because now I really want to open it up for the audience to provoke, to entreat, to congratulate, whatever. So, and I see the mic can go right in the middle there. I don't know how I'll do it.
Yeah, maybe to respond to something that Charles said, and yesterday actually someone in the audience missaid was, someone yesterday in the audience mentioned Hamza Ahsan and the attack on Hamza Ahsan, and they mentioned that he was a Palestinian artist, and Charles just talked about how institutions should invite Palestinian artists. I think that's not actually the issue here. The issue is how to many of the works and the artists that were in Documenta included the work of the Algerian collective working on the archive and the history of feminist collectives and movement in Algeria. They were attacked for having images that had to do with Palestine. This is anti-colonial struggles in solidarity. The Black Archives had an amazing shelf of books in the exhibition about solidarity between the Black struggle and the Palestinian struggle. I can, and what Yasin was actually trying to say at some point today was also this is the dilemma of Palestine. The problem is about I think not only about including Palestinian artists, but it's about that it's an intersectional struggle, right? And it will come up everywhere, in the queer struggle, in the anti-colonial struggle, and it keeps coming out. It's like this game that the head keeps coming. So how do the institutions deal with it? And you know, at the same time with speaking about decolonial struggle, and I think it's not a coincidence also, again, that it comes out in Documenta, not in the way that we have been attacked for it, is that we have been working with grassroots organizations and artists that belong to social and political movement and are not removed from that context. And so it keeps coming out, because these are struggles and social and political movements who have solidarities. Yeah, just wanted to add this maybe.
No, yes, you can keep that one.
Yeah. Hi. I kind of wanted to go back. Maybe it's not really a question for someone in particular, but going back to what Ade started with today about change being either from the inside or from the outside, and this differentiation between operating from within or barking from outside. And I think that also earlier on, I think Florian mentioned something about the different art worlds that are operating, kind of like the Art Basel being over there and us being here talking about Documenta. But what I saw or what I witnessed from how Documenta impacted other modes of exhibiting, or other art worlds, or just people in general that attended that and then went to other worlds or exhibitions, was showing that little impacts or little explosions that could happen in Documenta 15 will get loud enough to be impacted somewhere else. And I think that those moments of eruptions basically can erupt other narratives or other chronological ways of doing. And Charles, you mentioned that throughout your career, what you've been trying to do is really think about how inside this institution, inside Van Abbe, we can really reflect on how can we do things differently. And basically, my question would be, what if Lumbung, I know that Alex mentioned that it's not really a curatorial practice, but what if in curations of these spaces inside of the Van Abbe, as a curator, someone would look into it and decide, we're making an exhibition, how about this exhibition be something that is constructed within the artists themselves? How about they need to be the ones who are discussing what the theme is or what the exhibition is going to look like, or just having months of discussion before the exhibition, where the exhibition can be really something that is collaborative between artists, because Lara, as you have mentioned, solidarity can come from institutions and it can mean the world and it can change a lot of things. But what you guys witnessed at Documenta was the solidarity that came from your fellow artists. And that's something, I mean, artists are being wiped out. There's too many middlemen in between. And so those middle people are getting all the time spent and energy and reflection. And I mean, it's great. Curators come from research based, and they have a theme that they are particularly experts to a certain extent with. But then they invite artists, and then artists need to do that labor. And so maybe that Lumbung can actually be a curatorial practice. Maybe it can be something exhibition. Of course, it can be more continuous and not end, as you mentioned, Ade, as well, with an end date. But maybe it can be from the beginning something that's reflective. I don't know.
I guess. Can it erupt inside the institution is the question. Can it erupt the institution is the question. I don't know why it's not working. Can it erupt inside? Can it erupt the institution? Can it not be the salvation, but can it salvage some of the institution? Charles? Very quickly.
Very quickly.
Yes.
I mean, I think that proposal is great, and I think that Lumbung gives us a certain permission to do some of those things that it would be much more difficult to do so afterwards. I think also one of the other aspects of Lumbung that I'm really thinking about and understanding more is the cycle in which the extraction of an exhibition from an artist needs to be compensated for in a way that's much more equal, much more equitable than it has been up to this point. And that means that it means doing less exhibitions, it means changing the course of the resources, which is something that institutions are not great at. As I was saying to somebody else, there's often this statement of, it's a great idea, but it's illegal. And that's one way of controlling it. So sending money elsewhere is often declared to be illegal. So we have to change those structures. But I think that I absolutely agree that I think Lumbung is a challenge to the existing behaviors, the existing customs, and very possibly to the idea of the curatorial in general. And I think that that's something we have to embrace. What exactly that means on a day-to-day basis, I think, is still to be done. But it's clear that it's an offer that if we pick it up, we can't go on as we were.
All right.
Can I?
Yes. Yes, please.
Thank you. Can I add, because I'm going to replace him in Van Abbe. Exchange students. No.
You're hired.
No. I think there's at least we learned two things. Like I think like scale is really important to this, and I think the thing is it's we're pretty bad in math. So like there is a I mean, it's not really science, but like I think there should be some, I don't know how, but I think there should be some other way to sort of like measure, or like there is sensoric measurement that it actually should be split in like a cell, or like rhizome as well, like it should be collectively conscious decide that it should be split and then split again, and then the homework is actually how to make this all connect and interconnected, and that one thing, and also time. I think like this model, for example, would not applicable in Biennale, for example. It's like Biennale basically is 1 year. Like this is even sometimes we think like this is too much work in a certain time. So like scale time, which is I think while museum or exhibition already being designed in a certain way that it's not on that value or it's not on that model. So it needs sort of like very basic structure and also architectural, because I think exhibition inherently extractive. And I mean like documenta, like museum of 100 days. We try to change it to 90 days actually, because that's Indonesian Sangan visa maximum.
All right. We're going to.
But there is this time, and then also I think really a basic thing that it should change. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to continue on that and the institution. Like if we say this Lumbung is a kind of common system and in common theory, there is also this idea there needs to be this kind of safeguarding space around the commons not to be attacked, no? To have the time, as Ade says, to be developed and flourish. So that's maybe a question I would have to institutions on that. We've also tried to do previously working at the funder, and other people are here. Like could institutions that actually want to support this kind of, like Van Abbe, or be this kind of safeguard, no? See their role as like be the safeguard for that process to flourish. And I mean, it comes with the issues of time and problems, but maybe to start envisioning that role. Yeah.
Yes, Lara.
Maybe on a smaller scale, also to respond to this question, whether it's possible, and what made it maybe so. For example, we thought a lot while thinking about the common pot and about how how artists can govern the funds together and think of the collaborations together. We had to think prior to that how already the environment is quite hostile and competitive, right, between artists, and so exactly this what Gertrude is saying, that there needs you need to have a structure to build a whole environment where this is no longer the case, so that this can happen, right? So that there was this decision to distribute the production budgets, for example, equally, so that then we start from there talking about the common pot and how the artists would like to govern it. That the venues are the distribution of venues is about function rather than the more important project or the less, right? So you have to have a whole, and I don't know if institutions and the setup in institutions can bear this. And another factor, I think that many of us were already also not really. We were embedded inside the collectives. I think this is a very, very important. Ruangrupa are an artist collective. They are embedded. I am with the question of funding. Gertrude is with Arts Collaboratory. Fred with Trampoline. I mean, this is why we were, right, not to remove us from also our contexts and ecosystems, and to. So it was. I think that made a difference, right? To understand the needs. We were part and parcel. So. Yeah, maybe on a smaller scale also to just think together about this question.
No, I think just because the organizers will ask me to tie up now, and we're actually going to go into another moment right after this where we are going to talk a little bit more about just reflecting on the last 2 days, thinking together, celebrating each other a little bit. And if we are allowed to do that, I want to close with two things. One, actually, Charles, you mentioned something which I find interesting, because Stuart Hall also has something when he speaks about the conjuncture. And in Stuart Hall's conjuncture, it is a moment of threat, a moment but it is also a moment of opportunity. It is that moment when you feel it's going to implode, but then you need to find a way to find new modes of imagining what is possible. So one could take this moment as that threat and ask the question, what next, how next? And perhaps that is what Lumbung does without pushing so much into it or onto it. It is perhaps a simple gesture of acknowledging, actually, and I come from the institution, Charles said that we were given objects. No, we took some of them. That's what colonialism does. So perhaps one of the things that it does say to us is not to think about whether or not it can be or whatever, but to acknowledge that the institution as it now is impossible. It cannot hold. It cannot continue. And even if it is in the small gestures, share the pot, share the money, something needs to be different. And the question is, how do we do that? And you might retire from this museum, but you have another one that you need to change. I'd like you to help me to thank the presenters.